Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes, where we take a deep dive into Troubled, a memoir of foster care, family, and social classes by Rob Henderson. This isn't just a powerful, raw look at a life shaped by the foster care system. It's really a profound challenge to how we think about well-being and success. Henderson's story, from extreme instability in foster care all the way to the prestigious halls of Yale and Cambridge, it reveals how even achieving the highest academic credentials doesn't just erase the deep-seated impact of a chaotic upbringing.
That's a really powerful summary of his core message, yeah. Henderson isn't just recounting his experiences. He's dissecting societal narratives around poverty, education, and family, and often revealing how elite perspectives can kind of miss the mark on what truly supports children. He makes a very compelling case that stability and emotional security are far more foundational than, the traditional markers of achievement.
So our mission today is to journey through Henderson's life, exploring not just the events, but the surprising insights he uncovers about privilege and social class. We'll be keeping a close eye on those core themes that weave through his entire narrative: the impact of family, stability, emotional security, versus society's prevailing focus on credentials and, well, financial gain. You're in for some thought-provoking revelations, I think. Let's unpack this. So Rob Henderson's earliest memories, they paint such a stark picture of profound instability. It starts with the very origins of his name, which was taken from 3 adults who abandoned him. And he recounts how doctors and social workers often labeled him and other foster kids as troubled, right? A designation that felt deeply at odds with their lived experience of being overlooked and, frankly, neglected. Can you give us a sense of what those initial years in foster care truly felt like for him?
It's really striking how immediately he felt that disconnect. His first foster home in Los Angeles, for instance, it was a small, crowded duplex, lots of children. He describes it as a place where the TV was just a constant background noise, almost like a separate world. He even recalls the confusion of hearing Simpson on the news and thinking it was the cartoon. And food scarcity was a consistent problem there. And then he experienced this profound sense of loss when, at just 4 years old, he was moved to the De La Peñas in West Covina. He describes clutching a table leg, just crying uncontrollably, unwilling to let go of what little familiarity he had.
Wow, that image. Clinging to a table leg, it really speaks volumes. And it led to that hunger strike, didn't it?
Okay.
Hoping his social worker jury would bring him back. So what challenges did he face in this new environment? How did they continue to reinforce that feeling of being, as he puts it, all alone?
Well, the language barrier with Mrs. De La Peña was immediate. He recounts being unable to get school lunches because his foster mother mistook the form, thinking it was a payment request, so he often went hungry. And the kindness of a classmate, Anthony, sharing his bologna sandwich, that really stands out as just a brief respite and all that. This period also saw his first experience with alcohol in the garage with older foster boys. He mistook gin for apple juice and beer for soda, but he definitely felt a thrill of transgression in those moments, like a small act of control in a world that felt totally uncontrollable.
Right, trying to find some agency. And that pattern of neglect and misunderstanding, it clearly extended to his academic life too, didn't it? He moved from the chaotic De La Peña home to the Martinez's in the San Gabriel Valley, where he essentially became a 7-year-old pool boy.
Mm.
This was, okay, a quieter, cleaner environment, but what did it lack that was so crucial?
Yeah, quieter maybe, but it lacked genuine care and, frankly, safety. There's this harrowing incident where he nearly drowned in their pool because he didn't know about deep ends. And Mrs. Martinez, still on the phone, eventually pulled him out with a pool net and just casually told him, "Next time I'll drop the net and you can drink up the whole pool."
Oh my gosh.
That profound indifference just fueled his explicit feeling of being all alone out here. And his struggles continued in school, attending 6 different elementary schools before 3rd grade. And the psychologists, they attributed his academic issues to a learning disability,
Right.
completely missing the instability of his life and his emotional numbness.
It's just tragic how often those external labels miss the root cause. His anger then manifested in these violent incidents, like tackling a boy over a stolen quarter, and he even learned pickpocketing with another kid, Jason. How did this cycle of defiance and sort of externalizing his pain become a coping mechanism?
Well, these were desperate attempts for control, really, and a way to externalize the internal chaos he was feeling. Mrs. Martinez's punishments were often tied more to her own personal inconvenience, it seems, like making him run until your heart explodes for a Slurpee incident, kind of ignoring the underlying behavior. And his difficulty with reading, like mistaking citizen for cousin, that was a symptom of this broader disengagement. It wasn't until a teacher made a simple observation, you can't know everything about people just by looking at them, that he felt inspired to actually learn. And reading then became this profound escape and source of comfort for him, a crucial lifeline, really, even if he still neglected other schoolwork. He sums up this whole period as just being defined by this pervasive dread.
Yeah, dread. Given all that, it truly feels like an adoption lottery when he was shown that video of the Henderson family who promised a permanent and stable placement.
Mm.
The move to Red Bluff, Northern California.
Yeah.
That must have felt like landing on a different planet after Los Angeles. What was that transition like?
Oh, absolutely. It was a stark contrast. Much smaller population, 13,000 people, very different weather. But interestingly, similar widespread poverty beneath the surface, like 21% below the poverty line, almost 30% for kids. Yet, despite the high crime rates there too, he initially found a sense of safety he hadn't had before. His new adoptive parents, mom and dad, introduced him to the unfamiliar experience of actually having a father figure. He cherished moments like dad teaching him Korean words and their pride when his grades improved, especially winning third place in a spelling bee, which was pretty remarkable considering his struggles with reading just, 18 months prior.
That's wonderful to hear, those moments of genuine connection and validation. And this is also where he really cultivated his love for books like Encyclopedia Brown, Goosebumps, and especially the Boxcar Children. He resonated deeply with the orphan characters in that last one, didn't he?
Yes, he said it made him feel less alone.
And for the first time, he experienced that overwhelming joy of stability presents, a bicycle on his first birthday.
Yeah.
But that hard-won stability was pretty short-lived, wasn't it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes. His parents' divorce marked a huge shift, a seismic shift, really. His younger sister, Hannah, seemed to pick up on the emotional distress maybe more acutely than he did initially. He began alternating weeks between mom's rather gloomy duplex and dad's house, and during this period, he found himself gravitating toward Sean's foster home, a place that was chaotic, noisy, few rules, much like his earliest placements, actually. There, he found comfort in video games like Mario Kart and GoldenEye, and new music downloaded from Napster. These distractions, just like his books before, helped him cope with the divorce fallout.
It seems like he was always finding ways to kind of disengage or distract himself from the difficult realities. And then a significant blow came when Dad withdrew from his life, almost as a form of a revenge against Mom, as Henderson puts it. Yet, in Red Bluff, his unusual backstory of the foster care, it wasn't such an anomaly because many local kids came from what he calls messy families. How did that context influence his escalating coping mechanisms, particularly around alcohol and fighting?
That normalization, perhaps, is partly why his earlier experiences with alcohol and cigarettes escalated. Sneaking drinks with his friend Christian at age 9, chasing that sort of illicit excitement. Fighting became another really key coping mechanism. He notes how fights in Red Bluff, unlike his earlier experiences, sometimes actually led to enduring friendships, like with Edgar. So these weren't just impulsive acts. They were a way to kind of test and reestablish the pecking order, something his therapy sessions with Janet later helped him understand.
Right. Those mandated therapy sessions with Janet sound pretty crucial. What insights did she offer him about his fight-or-flight response and the impact of his chaotic childhood?
Janet helped him connect his present struggles, including that heightened fight-or-flight response, directly to his childhood trauma. Specifically, his deep-seated fear of expressing pain because he worried it would lead to him being moved again from foster homes. It was just a terrifying prospect for him to let his guard down. Interestingly, though, he eventually decided against continuing therapy. He didn't see visible progress like you would in, say, a gym routine. And then more instability followed when his mom came out as gay and began a relationship with Shelley. Their new family faced numerous challenges. Shelley's daughter had a miscarriage, and then Shelley herself suffered a severe injury from a stray bullet at a shooting range. Henderson recounts that chaotic scene and his mom's surprising focus on taking insurance pictures rather than praying, feeling it was just further evidence that the world was fundamentally unstable.
Gosh, just one thing after another. These compounding traumas clearly continued to shape his adolescence, and you mentioned his high ASES VAB score matching a straight-A student. Yet he was hiding report cards, forging signatures, doing just enough to pass classes. It really illustrates how potential can be so deeply inhibited by that kind of past. What other behaviors define this period for him?
Well, he describes acts of rebellion like daring his friend Hugo to hit a teacher with a rubber band and witnessing another friend, Tyler's, violent outburst in the school parking lot. His first job as a dishwasher and busboy brought this unexpected pride and hard work. He realized work was actually an escape from the tensions at home, and he specifically preferred reading memoirs of tough lives. He sought them out as a way to cope and feel less alone, deliberately choosing stories of hardship over, stories of perfect lives.
That's powerful, seeking out stories that mirrored his own internal turmoil. And Shelley's slow recovery from her injury, that added to the emotional toll, right? Leading him to find comfort in his new cell phone as just another distraction. His quest for alcohol and drugs among friends became pretty constant, and he notes that stark difference in access for boys versus girls. When he finally acquired a car, how did that represent a shift? And what kind of recklessness followed that?
Yeah, the car represented freedom, definitely. But his recklessness really escalated, playing chicken on train tracks, dirt jumping in a truck. But there was a critical turning point. He describes smashing someone's car lights and assaulting the man after an argument. He connects this act to witnessing Tyler kick a dog off a cliff earlier. It was this moment of realizing the incredibly dangerous path he was on. That stark self-awareness, that's what propelled him towards a completely new path.
And that new path was the military. At 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. How did this highly structured environment become, as he describes it, a kind of de facto parent that helped unlock his potential?
The military offered just such a sharp contrast to the drama and disorder of his youth. It taught him discipline, finance, prevented reckless spending, things he'd never really had. And it was during his deployment to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the Dubaid, that a truly pivotal intellectual awakening occurred for him. He read Steven Pinker's How the Mind Works, which really ignited his curiosity about human nature, and Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He was fascinated observing how prisoners in concentration camps responded so differently to those unimaginable environments. He also read the autobiography of Malcolm X around this time.
He also picked up on something interesting while watching The Sopranos there, didn't he? How even this fictional crime family prioritized their daughter getting into a good college. It highlighted education as this key ingredient of success, even in that context. But despite the structure and his intellectual growth, his actual military job felt unfulfilling. And this led to intense bouts of loneliness, alienation, and a growing reliance on alcohol, especially when stationed in Germany, where he often blacked out. What was the ultimate catalyst, the thing that finally forced him to confront his drinking?
The absolute pivotal moment came when his sister called him. The police were at her door. She was about to be placed back into foster care because his stepmom had left his dad's house in a total mess after a party. This just forced him to confront his own past in a visceral way and realize his drinking wasn't just a coping mechanism anymore, it was a profound problem. He identifies this twisted logic behind his drinking. Sometimes to disengage from bad feelings, sometimes just to feel something when he felt numb, or even to quell good feelings he felt he didn't deserve.
Wow. That confrontation propelled him into rehab after a particularly severe drinking incident. He was diagnosed with depression and alcohol dependency. He felt like a failure, didn't he? Like he was entering yet another institution, but this time he felt he had let himself down. How did rehab finally help him connect his present struggles back to his childhood trauma?
In rehab, yeah, he felt like a failure. But his counselor, Alan, was key. Alan helped him connect his present struggles directly to his childhood trauma, especially that fear of expressing pain, always worried he'd be moved again. This self-realization was a genuine breakthrough. It actually compelled him to try and contact Shelley after 7 years of no contact, marking a real turning point where accepting his past started leading to positive change. And this newfound clarity, this self-understanding, it really paved the way for his application to Yale.
His successful application to Yale through the Warrior Scholar Project. I mean, that sounds like a monumental achievement after everything. How did he navigate that incredibly elite academic environment, feeling like such an outsider, as he says? And what did he observe about the differences between his background and that of his privileged classmates?
He describes feeling like he kept waiting for them to tell me it was a mistake that he was even there. He noticed, interestingly, rampant drug and alcohol use on campus, which kind of countered his earlier belief that poverty was the main cause of substance abuse. A big revelation for him was learning effective study habits from his privileged classmates, things like making flashcards, summarization techniques. He realized that first-generation students like him often felt they had to read every single thing on the syllabus, unlike their peers who knew the shortcuts. And he also noticed that stark contrast in family structures. Something like 90% of his Yale classmates came from intact families, a profound disconnect from his own upbringing.
Right. That outsider perspective really became a lens for his later observations, didn't it? He even noted his lack of the requisite background knowledge to really understand the whole contentious national debate about higher education at the time. It highlights a significant cultural and informational divide. And these observations, this is what led him to develop that central concept of luxury beliefs. Can you elaborate a bit on what exactly those are?
Yeah, luxury beliefs. These are basically ideas and opinions that confer status on the upper class, usually at little personal cost to them, but which can inflict significant costs on lower classes. And he defines the upper class in this context not just by money, but specifically as those who attend or graduate from elite colleges and have at least one parent with a college degree. Parental education being a strong predictor of future lifestyle and opinions. And he gives some really compelling, almost uncomfortable examples, like the Yale classmate who casually says monogamy is kind of outdated but is planning a traditional monogamous marriage herself. Or the push from some elite circles for defunding the police or drug legalization, which he contrasts sharply with the realities for poorer communities often facing higher crime victimization, and where drugs can be a gateway to self-destruction for those from already dysfunctional homes.
Exactly. He also argues that the focus on representation over tangible help for struggling communities is another kind of luxury belief. He calls it trickle-down meritocracy. He suggests it often just strip mines talented people who then rarely return to actually help their original communities. He also discusses the concept of white privilege as often being a status display for the affluent. They face no personal cost for promoting the idea, while poorer white people might actually bear the brunt of policies based on it. He really zeroes in on how the upper class maintains its status through these constantly shifting cultural signals. He uses the musical Hamilton as a prime example, right?
Yeah.
Loved by elites when tickets were exclusive and expensive, then kind of ridiculed by the same people once it became mainstream on Disney Plus or Radio.
Yeah.
It shows how their tastes constantly shift to distinguish themselves.
Yeah, that constant search for distinguishing signals. It also explains, he argues, the educate yourself dismissal you sometimes hear. He sees it as a way that affluent can kind of block mobility because working class people often just don't have the leisure time or the specific social immersion needed to keep up with the ever-evolving cultural signals and intellectual fads.
Yeah.
And in a really poignant example, he talks about his volunteer work at New Haven Reads, tutoring a second grader named Guillermo who was struggling to read. Henderson connected with Guillermo over their shared experience of having absent fathers. And that connection, that shared lived experience, was what really fostered a deeper engagement and truly helped the boy learn. It underscores the importance of genuine connection over, say, just abstract theories.
That story really drives the point home, doesn't it? Ultimately, his time at Cambridge, where he felt like the class clown among serious scholars, brought even deeper reflection on his life. What was his major realization, comparing his turbulent childhood versus his military experience? And what did he conclude about society's primary goals, or what they should be?
He concluded that his turbulent childhood forced him to suppress emotions, operate constantly in fight or flight, and that effectively inhibited his potential. In stark contrast, the military, for all its flaws, inhibited his destructive impulses and actually cultivated his good qualities, gave him structure. So he came to believe that upward social mobility shouldn't actually be society's primary goal. Instead, it should be a side effect of achieving far more important things like family stability and emotional security for children. He states it pretty unequivocally. Conventional badges of success, like fancy degrees, they just do not repair the deep effects of a volatile upbringing.
And this all culminated in that powerful realization at his Yale graduation dinner. Despite all his academic and professional achievements, his true measure of success for him was the ability to be relied upon by his family and to be a better father than any of his own dads.
Right.
He reflects that he would trade all of it, Yale, Cambridge, even his New York Times op-ed, for a more stable childhood and just more family dinners.
It's such a powerful statement, isn't it? It completely turns our usual metrics of success on their head. He argues that those external accomplishments, they're ultimately trivial compared with having a warm and loving family. His whole journey just underscores that true societal progress might not come from just getting more kids into college, but from ensuring every single child has a safe, stable, and loving environment to grow up in.
Yeah. And this idea of luxury beliefs, it really starts to unpack some of those societal narratives we mentioned right at the beginning, doesn't it? It really makes you stop and think. Are some of the ideas we champion, especially those of us who are maybe more well-resourced, or are they actually creating more problems for others down the line? It's uncomfortable.
It definitely raises an important question for all of us, I think. If a stable family provides the best possible foundation for a child's future, how do we as a society actually prioritize and support that over other interventions that might be more visible, maybe more status conferring, but ultimately less impactful?
It certainly leaves you with a lot to ponder, that's for sure. So what does this all mean for you listening? Maybe consider the source of your own beliefs about success, about family, about what truly helps others. Are they built on lived experience, perhaps? Or maybe, just maybe, on what confers social status. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.